The Basque conflict, also known as the Spain-ETA conflict, was an armed and political conflict between the Spanish state, France, and the Basque National Liberation Movement, a group of social and political Basque organizations which sought independence from Spain and France. The movement was built around the separatist organization ETA, which since 1959, launched a campaign of attacks against Spanish administrations. In response, ETA was proscribed as a terrorist organization by the Spanish, British, French and American authorities. The conflicts took place mostly on Spanish soil, although to a smaller degree it was also present in France, and was the longest violent conflict in modern Western Europe. It has been sometimes referred to as Europe's longest war. The terminology is controversial. Basque conflict is preferred by Basque nationalist groups, including those opposed to ETA violence. Spanish public opinion generally rejects the term, seeing it as legitimate state agencies fighting a terrorist group. The conflict has both political and military dimensions. Its participants include politicians and political activists on both sides, the Abbot Sala left and the Spanish government, and the security forces of Spain and France fighting against ETA and other small organizations, usually involved in the Kale Borroka. Far-right paramilitary groups fighting against ETA were also active in the 1970s and 1980s. Although the debate on Basque independence started in the 19th century, the armed conflict did not start until ETA was created. Since then, the conflict has resulted in the death of more than 1,000 people, most of them police and security officers, members of the armed forces, Spanish politicians, journalists and other civilians, and some ETA members. There have also been thousands of people injured, dozens kidnapped, and a disputed number has gone to exile either to flee from the violence or to avoid capture by Spanish or French police or by Europol, Interpol. On 20 October 2011, ETA announced a definitive cessation of its armed activity. Spanish Premier José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero described the move as a victory for democracy, law and reason. Definition of the conflict. The Basque conflict is used to define either the broad political conflict between a part of Basque society and the unionist model of the Spanish and French states, to exclusively describe the armed confrontation between ETA and the Spanish and French states, or to describe a mixture of both perspectives. According to José Ramón Blázquez, the Basque political conflict is constituted by the legitimate claim of a big part of Basque society for a frame of sovereignty in face of the unionist Spanish state model, resulting in an untenable situation for coexistence within a plural society to which the right to decide its own status is deprived. Beyond the law inherited from a dictatorship, whose violence led to the emergence of ETA and with it the distortion of the problem and the blockade of its agreed solution, the idea has been rejected, for example, by José María Ruiz Soroa and by the main constitutionalist Spanish parties that have rejected the existence of a political conflict and refer only to the action of a terrorist organization against the rule of law. In 2012, Antonio Basagoiti, the head of the Basque branch of the People's Party, admitted the existence of a Basque conflict, but stated that it was a political one between different entities in the Basque country. Amaya Senator Urko Ayarza and Dr. Julian Zabala have written that there is no unanimous agreement when it comes to determining the reasons for the so-called Basque conflict. According to different sources, it is either a long conflict with historical roots, an instrument of Basque nationalist politics, an attempt to impose a privilege, or evidence of the state's obstinacy. Whichever of these may be the case, an understanding of the historical relations between the Basque provinces and the Spanish and French states is indispensable in order to explain the present conflict. Background. The Basque Country is the name given to the geographical area located on the shores of the Bay of Biscay and on the two sides of the Western Pyrenees that spans the border between France and Spain. Nowadays, this area is fragmented into 3 political structures: the Basque Autonomous Community, also known as Euskadi, and Navarre in Spain, and 3 French provinces known as the Northern Basque Country. Approximately 3 million people live in the Basque Country. Basque people have managed to preserve their own identifying characteristics such as their own culture and language throughout the centuries, and today a large part of the population shares a collective consciousness and a desire to be self-governed, either with further political autonomy or full independence. Over the centuries, the Basque Country has maintained various levels of political self-governance under different Spanish political frameworks. Nowadays, Euskadi enjoys the highest level of self-governance of any non-state entity within the European Union. However, tensions about the type of relationship the Basque territories should maintain with the Spanish authorities have existed since the origins of the Spanish state, and in many cases have fueled military confrontation, such as the Carlist Wars and the Spanish Civil War. Following the 1936 coup d'état that overthrew the Spanish Republican government, a civil war between Spanish nationalist and Republican forces broke out. Nearly all Basque nationalist forces, led by the Basque Nationalist Party, sided with the Republic. Even though Basque nationalists in Álava and Navarre fought along Basque Carlists on the side of Spanish nationalists, the war ended with the victory of the nationalist forces, with General Francisco Franco establishing a dictatorship that lasted for almost 4 decades. During Franco's dictatorship, Basque language and culture were banned, institutions and political organizations abolished, and people killed, tortured and imprisoned for their political beliefs. Thousands of Basques were forced to go into exile, usually to Latin America or France. Influenced by wars of national liberation such as the Algerian War or by conflicts such as the Cuban Revolution, and disappointed with the weak opposition of the PNV against Franco's regime, a young group of students formed ETA in 1959. It first started as an organization demanding the independence of the Basque Country, from a socialist and Marxist-Leninist position, and it soon started its armed campaign.